Mayonnaise is a staple that is found in kitchens and restaurants everywhere. But have you ever stopped to think about how that delicious sauce is made? How do they get it so creamy and smooth? And what's the story behind this popular condiment? Today, we'll explore the fascinating world of mayonnaise production, discover how over 1 million bottles are made in a single day, and uncover its surprising origins, and maybe even a dark side or two. So, get ready to learn how mayonnaise is made. The origins of mayonnaise. Mayonnaise has its own different versions in every culture, which is one of the reasons it's a global favorite. But before we go into details on how it is made and all the delicious ways to use it, let's go way back in time so we can find out where this sauce actually came from. The history of the invention of mayonnaise gets quite blurry. Most historians agree that mayonnaise came about in the 1800s, but the trail goes way back before that. Some think that ancient Egyptians and Romans were already whipping up mixtures of olive oil and eggs long before mayonnaise became what we know today. However, it's really the French who get the credit for perfecting this creamy delight into the thick condiment we all love. It is said that mayonnaise was a French chef's invention in the year 1756. At the time, he was preparing a feast to celebrate a win at Port Mahon on the island of Minorca, Spain. In those times, sauces used to contain cream and eggs, but the chef couldn't get some cream for himself. Thinking on his feet, he picked up some olive oil instead and went to work. The first batch was a success, and everyone loved it. They decided to christen this new sauce mayonnaise as a nod to its birthplace. Now, while that is probably the most popular story of how mayonnaise came to be, there's another side to the tale. There is a claim by some Spanish historians that it was the residents of Minorca who inspired the French chef. He reportedly learned to prepare the recipe from them. Then, there is also Marie-Antoine Carême, a very talented French cook, who brought mayonnaise to a completely different level. He invented this brilliant method of rendering the said condiment lighter by adding vegetable oil to egg yolks and mixing them together to form an emulsion. His version was very successful and spread rapidly all over the world. How mayonnaise took over America. Sometimes in the 19th century, mayonnaise made its way to American soil. Back then, you could say it was a rare treat because it was something you could only find in very fancy restaurants such as the Delmonico's in New York. But then came along Richard Hellman. He was a man with a passion for food. He wasn't interested in keeping mayonnaise locked away in the world of the elite. In 1912, he and his wife decided to open a deli, a little spot that quickly grew in reputation and became a local favorite. The secret? Their homemade mayonnaise. It was made right in their own kitchen, and they used it to bind together various salads. The salads were good, but it was the mayonnaise that really made them stand out. At first, the mayonnaise was just an ingredient, something to hold the salads together. But it wasn't long before customers started to take notice. They would ask Richard if they could buy just the mayonnaise without the salad. Richard and his wife soon realized they had stumbled upon something that people really wanted, something that could be so much more than just an ingredient. With each request, their idea grew. What if they made mayonnaise in larger quantities, not just for the deli, but for people to take home and enjoy whenever they liked? The couple decided to start making mayonnaise in larger batches. Their recipe was simple but effective. Vinegar for a bit of tang, sugar and salt for balance, and a blend of spices that gave it just the right kick. They packed their mayonnaise in small wooden containers at first, each batch made with care, just like they did at home. But as word spread and demand grew, those wooden vessels just weren't enough. The couple knew they needed something more practical, so they switched to glass jars. These jars would become a symbol of their brand, each one filled with the same homemade goodness that started it all. And when even that wasn't enough to keep up with orders, they took a bold step forward. They built their first factory in Astoria, Oregon. And that's how a simple kitchen creation became a household staple, spreading from coast to coast, just like the journey that brought mayonnaise to America in the first place. Traditional recipes and modern techniques. At this point, let's explore how mayonnaise was made in the past before we shift our focus to the modern methods. Back in 1815, French chef Louis Eustache Ude shared his recipe. He said to take 3 spoonfuls of Allemande sauce, 6 of aspic, and 2 of oil. Add a splash of tarragon vinegar, one that hasn't been boiled, along with some pepper, salt, and minced ravigote, or just parsley. Mix this into pieces of fowl or fillets of sole. The key step is to chill the mayonnaise. Don't add the meat or fish until the sauce starts to freeze. Following this, coat your meat or fish with the sauce before it's fully frozen. Then, finish it off with garnishes like beetroot, jelly, or nasturtiums. Fast forward to 1820. and French chef André Viard described something closer to the mayonnaise we know today. His method involved raw egg yolks, mixed with a bit of salt and lemon juice in a small bowl. With a wooden spoon, he would stir the mixture while drizzling in oil. As the sauce began to thicken, a little vinegar was added. Viard used about a pound of good oil and suggested serving the sauce with salt, either white or green, depending on whether you added ravigote greens or spinach. This version was great for cold fish entrees or salads made from vegetables cooked in salt water. Then, in February 1856, the Huddersfield Chronicle and West Yorkshire Advertiser published a simple homemade mayonnaise recipe under the Housewife's Corner. It called for 6 egg yolks, half a bottle of olive oil, and half a teaspoon of vinegar. The recommendation? Pour this over roast chicken or turkey, with a garnish of lettuce and hard-boiled eggs. Making modern mayonnaise can be done by hand with a whisk or fork, or you can use an electric mixer or blender for a quicker option. The key is to slowly mix in oil with an egg yolk while whisking really well. This helps spread the oil evenly throughout the mixture. When you do this right, it creates an emulsion, which is a fancy way of saying that the oil and water from the yolk blend together nicely. Now, let's talk about some interesting details. The way oil droplets stick together in mayonnaise has to do with tiny forces called van der Waals interactions and electrostatic repulsion. These forces help give mayonnaise its thick and creamy texture, which makes it so enjoyable. Also, adding mustard not only boosts the flavor but helps keep everything mixed together. Mustard has its own emulsifying properties, thanks to something called lecithin. If you add vinegar straight to the yolk, it can help you mix in even more oil, letting you make a bigger batch of mayonnaise. It's all about finding the right balance of ingredients and techniques that turn simple items into a delicious homemade treat. Next, we see how big brands like Hellmann's and Kewpie produce mayonnaise on a large scale. How commercial mayonnaise is made. Commercial mayonnaise production is a bit of a process. Each jar has to meet some pretty high standards for taste and quality. So, how do these big names consistently produce the creamy, flavorful mayonnaise which ends up in millions of homes around the world? Well, it starts with the basics, which you know by now. This includes vegetable oil, egg yolks, and something acidic, like vinegar or lemon juice. Now, during commercial production, the egg yolks might be used as a liquid, or sometimes they come in powdered form. As for the oil, this is usually a neutral one, like soybean oil. This type of oil is chosen because it blends well without stealing the spotlight from the other flavors. But here's where things get interesting: the emulsification process. This is really the heart of how mayonnaise is made. It's when everything comes together, turning those simple ingredients into the rich, creamy sauce we find in our kitchens. In these large operations, they use high shear mixers. These mixers are pretty powerful, spinning at high speeds to create the force needed to mix the tiny droplets of oil evenly into the egg yolk mixture. That's how they get that smooth, even texture that's so familiar. The trick, though, is all in the timing. You can't just dump the oil in all at once. It has to be added slowly and carefully so it blends just right with the egg yolks. If they rush it or are not precise enough, the whole thing can go wrong and the emulsion can break. That means instead of a smooth mix, you get a separated mess that's no good for any use. The egg yolk is really key here. The amount has to be spot on. Too little, and the mixture won't hold together. Too much, and it might overpower everything else. After they've got that basic emulsion down, it's time to add some flavor. This is where the mayonnaise really starts to take on its character. They'll mix in spices and seasonings, things like salt, sugar, and mustard. Depending on what kind of mayonnaise is being produced, they might toss in some herbs or other spices to give it a unique taste. After the emulsion stage, there's another critical step. This is called pasteurization. You might not think much about it, but this process is very important for the safety of the whole process. Here is how it works. The mayonnaise gets heated to a specific temperature. This would not be too hot. However, it is just enough to get rid of any nasty bacteria that could spoil the product. Consider it like some sort of balancing act. They have to make sure it's safe to eat without affecting the taste or texture. Now, that is where advanced pasteurization systems come into play. These machines are designed to handle the job without compromising the quality of the mayonnaise. But pasteurization is just one piece of the puzzle. Afterward, the consistency of the mayonnaise becomes the focus. Now, if you have ever spread mayonnaise on bread, you will know that texture matters a lot. Whether it's thick and rich or a little lighter, getting it just right is key. To achieve that perfect consistency, manufacturers might add water or thickeners, especially in low-fat versions where modified food starch is common. This step is all about making sure the mayonnaise feels just right when you taste it. Smooth, creamy, and exactly how you expect it to be. Quality control is the next big hurdle that needs to be overcome. Every batch of mayonnaise goes through some serious testing before it's approved. This isn't just a quick check, it's thorough. They look at everything from pH levels to viscosity to flavor. Highly accurate instruments are used to take these measurements. This way, nothing is left to chance. These factors are usually compared against strict standards to ensure that the mayonnaise is consistent across all batches. By doing this, every single jar that leaves the factory is identical in quality to the one that came before it. After all these, there is the final step, which is packaging. This is where the mayonnaise gets ready for its journey to your kitchen. High-tech machines take care of the filling and bottling process. These machines are incredibly accurate as they ensure that each jar or bottle is filled with the right amount of mayonnaise. They work quickly and efficiently, and most importantly, hygiene is never compromised. Everything stays clean and safe, from the start of the process to the very end. But even after the mayonnaise is packaged, the work isn't done. Storage is another very critical aspect. The mayonnaise needs to be stored at the right temperature. This is done to maintain its quality until it reaches the store shelves or your home. To achieve this, cooling and storage systems are in place to keep everything at the perfect temperature. This careful handling continues right up until the mayonnaise is distributed, ensuring that it stays as fresh as possible until you're ready to use it. Mayonnaise versus the imitations. You have probably heard people talk about real mayonnaise before, right? It's one of those terms that gets tossed around a lot, most especially when there are conversations about what makes a good sandwich or salad. But have you ever stopped to wonder what exactly real mayonnaise is all about? Well, you see, when people mention real mayonnaise, they are talking about quality and authenticity. It's all about following certain standards to make sure you are getting something that is both original and tasty. So, what makes real mayonnaise special? You see, it all comes down to the ingredients. By now, we know the few basic things that make up mayonnaise. So, when we say real, it means using natural ingredients without any strange additives, like starches or extra sweeteners, that you might find in other products. Now here's the thing. There are rules in different places about what can be called real mayonnaise, and it is not the same everywhere. Kinda surprising, right? For example, take the Food and Drug Administration. They have some pretty specific guidelines, and according to the standards, if a food product would like to be labeled as mayonnaise, it should have a minimum of 65% of oil by weight. But not only that, it also should comprise the mandatory ingredients like vinegar and either egg or egg yolk. At first, these regulations can sound rather strict, but this is for a good cause, to ensure that the product you are purchasing is of good quality. As mentioned before, not every country plays by the same rules. Every region has its own guidelines according to local traditions and what people like. This means that what could be regarded as real mayonnaise can be pretty different depending on the part of the world. It's a bit like how different countries have their own takes on pizza or chocolate. There is no single way to do it, and each place has its own flavor. Now let's not forget about all those other products you see lining the shelves at the grocery store. The dressings and sauces that try to copy the taste and texture of real mayonnaise are countless, but don't be deceived, they are not made the same way. Some of them might use whole eggs in place of just yolks, or might even experiment with different types of vinegar or acids to get that tangy flavor. And then, there are those products that don't even try to include the eggs. Products marketed toward vegans or those with an egg allergy. Though creative and versatile with a whole plethora of flavors and textures, they are not quite the same as the real deal. Their ingredients and how they are used in cooking differ quite a bit from what you would expect to be in traditional mayonnaise. One very popular imitation of mayonnaise, worth mentioning, is Miracle Whip. It first came onto the scene during the Great Depression. Back then, many couldn't afford what we consider the real mayonnaise. It was a bit of a luxury because it wasn't cheap to make. So, somebody had the brilliant idea to make Miracle Whip. Instead of expensive oils and eggs, they used cheaper things like corn syrup and vinegar. The result was something that looked like mayonnaise but tasted totally different. It was way sweeter. Because of its ingredients, Miracle Whip cannot even legally be called mayonnaise. They have to call it salad dressing instead. This leads us to the age-old debate of Miracle Whip versus traditional mayonnaise. For some people, this is no competition. They see Miracle Whip as an imposter, something trying to be like mayonnaise but can never measure up. But then there are others who can't get enough of Miracle Whip. They love the unique flavor and the way it can be used for different kinds of dishes. How mayonnaise takes on different flavors across the globe. Now, some of us would say mayonnaise is very much the same no matter where you go. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Various countries have taken this creamy condiment and made it unique to their culture and cuisine. Let's find out how mayonnaise varies around the world. Our first country is Japan, and Japanese mayonnaise isn't just your ordinary mayo. It takes on a character all its own, thanks to one of the key ingredients, rice vinegar. It sounds like a tiny difference, but honestly, that changes everything around and gives it a flavor distinctly far from what most of us are used to. But that's not all. This mayo is thicker, creamier too, but the difference doesn't stop there. Japanese mayonnaise also tends to be slightly thicker than the ones from the West. This makes it very rich and almost luxurious in its texture, and it is so versatile in Japanese cooking. You can find it drizzled over an okonomiyaki, those savory pancakes loaded with cabbage and topped with all manner of goodies, or squeezed onto takoyaki, little fried balls filled with octopus. It's also a must with yakisoba, the stir-fried noodle dish, and goes absolutely well with katsu and karaage. The most popular mayonnaise brand by far is Kewpie, which has been around since 1925, thanks to Tochiro Nakashima. His goal was pretty simple, to make eating vegetables more enjoyable. And well, he seems to have nailed it. Now, let's go over to Russia. If you think mayonnaise is big in Japan, wait until you get to Russia. There, mayonnaise isn't a condiment, but pretty much a culinary standard. In fact, a study from as far back as 2004 showed Russia to be the only European country where mayonnaise sales was higher than that of ketchup. The Russian mayonnaise variant uses sunflower and soybean oils, which impart an entirely unique flavor and texture to the mayonnaise. Two of the most popular dishes in Russia, the Olivier salad and dressed herring, simply wouldn't be the same without a considerable amount of mayonnaise. One can safely say that in Russia it is not just a condiment, but part of the culinary identity related to their cuisine. Then there is Chile, which actually ranks as the third biggest consumer of mayonnaise per capita in the world, and first in Latin America. That is quite impressive. Commercial mayonnaise really took off back in the 1980s, and ever since then, well, it's become a staple in Chilean kitchens. One of the most popular ways to enjoy it is on completos, which are essentially Chile's answer to the hot dog. So, the mayonnaise is much more than a spread. Obviously, it is global, and knowing how other cultures have taken it and made it their own does make that little jar in your fridge seem just a bit more exciting, doesn't it? The dark side of mayonnaise. Mayonnaise has, over the years, been associated with some pretty serious health issues, particularly salmonella. What may surprise you is that this creamy condiment, if not made or handled properly, has been found to be behind some major outbreaks of foodborne illnesses. Actually, the thing that ties these outbreaks together is raw eggs. Every now and then, raw eggs can be infected with salmonella, a genus of bacteria infamous for some highly unpleasant symptoms. When these eggs end up in a batch of mayonnaise that doesn't have adequate barriers to bacteria growth, like heat or acid, the unfettered population can take root, grow, and multiply within the mixture. This has led to multiple large epidemics worldwide, with some quite severe. Let's rewind back to Denmark in 1955, when one of the greatest epidemics associated with the consumption of mayonnaise was caused by salmonella. And that wasn't a minor event. It affected approximately 10,000 people. The mayonnaise that caused the issue had a pH of 5.1. Now, pH is a measure of how acidic or basic something is, and in this case, the pH was too high to effectively kill off the salmonella, which was found in concentrations of 180,000 colony-forming units per gram. That is a lot of bacteria per gram, way more than enough to cause illness. And that wasn't the only time Denmark faced such a crisis. In a second outbreak, also in Denmark, 41 people got sick, and tragically, 2 of them died. The mayonnaise in this instance had an even higher pH of 6, and the salmonella levels were sky-high, 6 million colony-forming units per gram. Now those figures go to show why getting the acidity levels right during mayonnaise manufacture is so very important. But Denmark was not alone in this struggle. In 1976, there were serious outbreaks on 4 different flights to and from Spain. Imagine being hit by food poisoning on a plane. It must have been horrible. These outbreaks affected 500 people and tragically resulted in 6 deaths. The cause? You guessed it, salmonella in the mayonnaise served on board. Fast forward to 1984 and the problem popped up again, this time in the United States. A New York City hospital prepared mayonnaise in-house. Unfortunately, something went very wrong. The result was 404 sick people, with 9 of them dying. Heartbreaking when you think that these were patients already in the hospital for other reasons. The common root cause in all these cases was mayonnaise that was not acidified properly. That is, the pH was higher than the maximum recommendation of 4.1, which can hold back bacteria. Now you must be wondering if there is some safety measure to be taken when making mayonnaise. The good news is that some brands are already using pasteurized eggs. These are eggs that have been heated to a point which kills bacteria without cooking the egg itself. It decreases the risk of salmonella contamination. So, while mayonnaise is a delicious and versatile condiment, like all foods, it needs to be prepared and stored correctly to keep it safe. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.